Shalom, friends. Do you currently feel like you're living in a Nightmare Hieronymus Bosch painting? Because I sure do. With those nightmares in mind, and because we have been talking a lot about Leviathan in the deep this week, welcome to Jewish Book Reactions. On this episode, God's monsters, vengeful spirits, deadly angels, hybrid creatures, and divine hitmen of the Bible by Dr. Esther Hamori. This is a book I would describe as marvelously traumatizing and wonderfully hilarious. What a combo. This book takes us on a tour to meet all the monstrous entities we find in the Tanakh. And a question the author poses in her introduction is, who are the monsters and what do they tell us about their boss, aka God? I love so many things about this book, including the myriad pop culture references. Hellboy, Supernatural, Chucky, Pennywise, Jurassic Park, South Park, The Joker and The Dark Knight, none of which are references I have ever used in my own videos, so may I say, game recognizes game. Dr. Hamori makes the point that these monsters are not God's opponents. They are, in fact, God's entourage. She notes something I talk about all the time, and one of the reasons I occasionally use adult language in my videos. I know it is so very rare, but it has happened once or twice. She writes, "These texts have been compiled and canonized, interpreted and misinterpreted, cherished and wielded. PG versions of stories are mistaken for what's in the text themselves and mask what's right before our eyes. The Bible has been domesticated, along with the eerie creatures within. Familiar images like beautiful seraphim, winged and singing, and peaceful divine messengers ascending and descending might register to the modern reader as what is in the Bible, but beware, in those pages, monsters play freely, wreaking havoc and bringing death and destruction to their divinely chosen targets." Sometimes you guys will write in my comment section things like, I had never heard that version of that story before in Hebrew school, and this is why. This is why. It has been sanitized. Dr. Hamori talks about many entities in this book, like seraphim, flying multi-winged fire serpents that can hover like helicopters. No thank you. In fact, here's an image where I literally wrote, no fucking thank you. Then you've got cherubs or cheruvim, the guardians of the boundaries of sacred spaces like in the Holy of Holies, the bouncers of God who are not, in fact, happy little baby creatures. She talks about the adversary, Hasatan, and here is an illustration, a medieval painting, which, as you can see from my note, made me think this is absolutely something Gaga would wear and just rock at the Met Gala. Look at that and tell me that Gaga wouldn't make that the most high fashion entrance that carpet has ever seen. Yes. Then we've got the Angel of Death, the Destroyer, although she makes the excellent point that technically all angels could be angels of death at some point, depending on what God is having them do. Here you can see I have indeed decorated that page with some eyes. Biblically accurate. So much juicy material in this book, but let's get to the reason I'm doing this video, which is in fact the big fish, the Leviathan. Earlier this week when I made the video talking about the Leviathan, a lot of you asked, wait, didn't God rudely massacre the Leviathan already, which happens in Tehillim? So did God massacre God's pet? Question. Turns out, yes and no. In the horror movie genre, monsters don't stay dead, and the Leviathan is no exception. But despite some depictions of Leviathan as God's vanquished foe, in other places, like the Talmudic source that I talked about the other day, we get the Leviathan as God's bestest friend and beloved pet. A thing of wonder, literally the pinnacle of creation. Like, we think we humans are hot shit? No. God is all about Leviathan, this creature that boils the water as he swims through it, breathing fire. Basically, God saying that God made the world for Leviathan, not for us, and we need to sit down and be humble. In the book of Job, God does a description of the Leviathan's bod that is not unlike the detail and descriptions of the Song of Songs. Okay, and I know that is a little questionable, but Dr. Hamori does talk about that interesting psychological element too, and literary comparison as well, and that is very informative and a little disturbing. Just the way I like it. Let me read you just a brief selection from this chapter. Mortal enemy, eternal beloved. If we needed more evidence of God's ambiguous stance towards the monstrous, we're looking at it in the glowing red eyes. But God has already demonstrated that his loyalty isn't to human beings, and sidebar, why would it be? Let's be honest. He's shown this clearly, although he's never quite admitted it before. It turns out his true loyalty is something he can shout from the rooftops. In God's definitive picture of creation, by far the longest and most elaborate description of creation out of his mouth in the entire Bible, he omits human beings. The sea monster is wholly separate from God's entourage. God never deploys Leviathan on a mission or commands him to strike. His relationship with the sea monster is different. In that relationship, in his own effusive words, God's allegiance comes into painfully sharp focus. We finally know where we stand. The last chapter of this book covers the monster of all monsters. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You'll just have to get the book to find out. I rate this book 10 out of 10 terrifying, fiery flying serpents. I think it would make a fantastic beach read, although you might have some second thoughts about going into the water after you have read it.